welcome everybody to the February 21st, 2022 Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission for the City of Raleigh. My name is Dwight Otwell. I am the current chair of the board. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting. I'll go through some introductions real quick, and I'm just going to scan through who I see here in the videos and make the introductions myself, if you will allow me the liberty. Start off with Vice Chair, Commissioner Nick Neptune. Raise your hand. We also have he is also the chair of our outreach committee. Joe Caruso is the chair of our policy committee. And we have Pierre Tong, who is the chair of our planning committee. And going by order of who I see in my random grid, we have Commissioner Brian Thomas, Commissioner Celise Bravo Taylor, Commissioner Mary Jo Gellenbeck, and Commissioner Pierre Tong. Commissioner Elizabeth Alley has currently got her video off, but I see she just dropped off. Do we still have quorum?
Hey there, trying to get this camera driver reinstalled, so I'm on my phone.
Oh, cool. Well, there's Commissioner Elizabeth Alley on her alternate device. And I believe I see Mary Person. B. Person is in the audience from the City of Raleigh, along with Jason Harden, Barbara Godwin, and Assistant Director Paul Cowan. Did I miss anybody? I see that's Elizabeth on the phone. Okay, I got it. Elizabeth Alley. All right.
This is Stern.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I'd like to welcome Commissioner Tammy Stern, one of our new commissioners. And sorry for that. My grid pops around a bit sometimes, and I miss people. Thank you.
We also have Brandy Crawford from Transportation as well on the line.
Oh, and I see Commissioner Kari Barsness has just joined us as well. So, thank you. We'll keep an eye out for folks as they pop in. We're expecting a few more folks in addition to a new commissioner. So I hope we can welcome them today. All right, I'd like to move on to approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. And I will assume that everybody's had a chance to review that. And I'd ask for either comments or corrections or a motion to accept the minutes. All right, I guess everybody's reviewing it, but I'm gonna go ahead. I will move that we accept the minutes as currently written. Could I get a second? A second from Commissioner Thomas. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? I don't see anybody. We'll make that unanimous. Thank you very much. And this will bring us down to public comments on the agenda. So, Ms. Godwin, is there anybody from the public signed up to speak tonight?
I put a note in the chat a few minutes ago and have not received any interest in anyone speaking. But of course, if someone would be interested in speaking on any items coming up on the agenda, just put a note in the chat.
And we will keep our ears open. Thank you. This will move us right along into the presentations. And at this point, I will turn it over to Jason Harden from the Planning Department to discuss New Bern Avenue Station Area Planning updates.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Jason Harden, Planning and Development. So this commission had a conversation, I believe it's been about 4 or 5 months, about this project when we were headed into some community workshops. We're now at the phase where we have draft recommendations, which are in the process of reviewing, adding some detail, vetting, and we'll be producing a final report in the next month or so, which will ultimately go to City Council. But this is a great time to share and get feedback or answer questions if y'all have any. So I'm going to roll through a number of slides pretty quickly. So I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with the area, New Bern Avenue, bus rapid transit, extending from downtown to Wake Med across the Beltline, ultimately terminating at New Hope Road. So several stations. And the project that I'm speaking to is not planning the transit itself, not designing the stations or the lanes, but thinking about the communities within a walking distance of these stations thinking about providing more housing choice, addressing affordability, and from this group's perspective, addressing first mile and last mile connections. And we particularly have some outside the Beltline that I'm going to detail as we go through these slides. So next slide, please. So just a timeline of where we're at in the process. We started, at least in terms of public input, in the spring of last year, had those workshops. Many of you attended. Appreciate that, in September, October, and pulled all that together into the draft recommendations. Again, going through those, refining, adjusting, and set to conclude this in the spring, although the review and adoption process usually takes several months with Planning Commission and City Council. Next slide. In terms of, and I've probably already addressed some of these, but in terms of the topics for this, a lot about thinking about how we leverage the transit investment in bus rapid transit. Transit investment is only as good as we enable people to be able to use it. That means thinking about employment and housing near transit, means thinking about being able to safely and comfortably access transit stations on foot or bicycle. So we're looking at some zoning changes that address some of those issues, some direct city investments in housing affordability, some investments in pedestrian and bicycle safety. And then also with respect to safely and comfortably getting to stations, thinking about the design of new buildings and redevelopment, trying to avoid the vast parking lot fronting the street, which is a pretty uncomfortable situation for a lot of people and really does characterize a lot of this corridor the further east you move along it. Next slide. So just some scenes from some of the outreach that we did, got a lot of really good feedback and ideas during this process. Again, I know some of y'all were part of that, which I think was really helpful. We can go on to the next slide. We've asked a lot of questions about the real world trade-offs involved in this kind of process, allowing more change near stations. One of the elements that probably involves walkability and being able to use means other than driving to get to places is to simply allow more people to live closer to where they're going. So a lot of discussion about the trade-offs involved in allowing more change near the bus rapid transit stations, and a lot of support for the idea that if that means that improves walkability, if it reduces carbon emissions, which that does, then people will accept that there needs to be some kind of change. Also a lot, and this is less maybe to this group, but I know it's something that probably many of you are very concerned about, a lot of emphasis on affordability along this corridor. And so many of the recommendations are aimed at incentivizing the production of more affordable housing units, 60% of AMI or below, or direct city investments or public investments in that as well. So next slide. So we can go on to the next slide. In terms of a lot of what this project does look at is zoning changes. Again, thinking about allowing more people to live and work where we're investing in transit. So one of the big tools for that is what we call the Transit Overlay District, TOD overlay. And what that does, it allows more building height in exchange for including a percentage of units that are affordable at 60% of AMI, allows more height for employment uses. In terms of that streetscape and building form, requires that buildings be closer to the street and doesn't permit parking in between the building and the street. So again, creating those more comfortable places for people to walk or bike, requiring bicycle parking, something that we do in short-term bicycle parking, but not longer-term bicycle parking. So requiring that for new residential developments. Next slide. This is, and I have a couple of slides that are map-based and that are really probably too much to absorb all at once. We'll be sharing these slides with y'all. So you have a little bit more time to go through them. But what this is showing, it's existing zoning. That's the multicolored background you see. Well, what's outlined in black is where that transit overlay district is proposed to be applied. So that essentially is within a couple blocks of the stations. And then as you move east, some of those larger parcels actually means that it would be applied to some larger areas out there that are probably more ripe for larger scale redevelopment outside the Beltline, particularly where you have some vacant or high vacancy shopping centers that are likely to see some significant change in the future. So again, that is where that overlay district, this is ultimately council's decision, but where this is proposing to apply that, provide that incentive for affordable units with additional height, the additional building form requirements and more. So next slide. So here's where I'll talk a little bit more specifically about pedestrian and bicycle mobility, thinking about how people can access these stations more safely and comfortably than might be the case now. So one thing that we looked at really specifically is crashes and safety for people walking. The further east along the corridor you go, the higher the speeds, the wider the roads, the higher the number of pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. Definitely something that was prioritized during this process. Not the only part of the corridor where there's some issues to be resolved, but certainly in terms of safety, that was where it really stood out along the corridor. So next slide. So again, I guess I just said the word safety a couple times in a row. That's a big part of the consideration here. Thinking about access to the stations, equitable treatment along the corridor, and acknowledging that there are portions of the corridor where in the past city investments have not been as supportive of some of these goals as in other parts of the city. And then thinking about some specific near-term actions. Next slide. So this is the second of those slides where there's a lot to digest. We'll share this afterward, but this is the overall longer term framework for, and this is showing some new street connections over time, particularly outside the Beltline. That's where you have a very fragmented street grid. And as properties develop the opportunity to create a more tightly knit, gridded, connected network of streets, a couple of in orange, key bicycle connections. The yellow dots at the intersections is where, and many of these are part of the transit project itself, but where over time, and we do have some short-term priorities, making sure that those intersections are basically a complete intersection with crosswalks, with lighting, with everything that's needed to make them. And I think on New Bern Avenue itself, the transit project will do that inside the Beltline, but making sure that it's easy and comfortable for people to cross to be able to get to the stations. Next slide. And I just have a couple more and want to leave some time for some questions. So these are some areas where there are some higher priorities for improvements. And again, where we are at in this process is getting some feedback on these recommendations and refining. So this is where there's certainly room for some thoughts and comments if you have some, but looking at Tarboro Street as a more significant main street for St. Augustine's University, more of a key north-south connection to New Bern Avenue and Edenton Street. So looking at some traffic calming, some intersection improvements, perhaps raise crosswalks, additional lighting. So nothing incredibly radical, but just those smaller investments that can make a much more comfortable place for people to walk or bike. So next slide. Sunnybrook, this is more of a bicycle oriented intervention. Again, thinking about the last mile connection, how can people, and there's a fair amount of office and residential in this area. So making it easier for people to get to the station at WakeMed and then get on transit and get where they're going, or if they're just going to that area, get there more safely and comfortably as well. Next slide. And then the last couple of slides are outside the Beltline, where at the three intersections where there are stations, three main intersections, which are Treywick Road, Corporation, and New Hope Road, all, and I have a couple of slides that illustrate what's envisioned, but adding the basics for this being an intersection that works for people walking. Right now, they are designed for higher speed driving through here. You have a lot of lanes, multiple turn lanes, slip lanes, incomplete crosswalk markings. And so this emerged as one of the top priorities outside the belt line. Investing in this service, wanting to make sure that people are able to get across New Bern, to get to these stations, to be able to use transit. So we can go to the next slide. Similar with Corporation Parkway, and also looking at a road redesign of Corporation Parkway. It's probably over-designed, more lanes than it needs. Certainly more lanes than creates a comfortable place for people walking. Next slide. Similar treatment with New Hope Road. And this is an example of specifically what we're looking at these intersections. So this is New Bern and Treywick. So right now you have crosswalks only on a couple of legs. Suggest that people would, depending on which way they're crossing, say if someone is at the southwestern corner of that intersection, would basically cross 3 times, which I don't think people are likely to do. They're likely to just take a shorter path. And it's an overall intersection design that, again, prioritizes the ability of people driving to get through here quickly. You can see on the north side, the slip lane right there. So there is a crosswalk across that, but having walked that personally, it's pretty uncomfortable at best. And so we go to the next slide and start to rethink, one, just the basics. So adding some crosswalks where they don't exist and adjusting signal phase as needed, potentially eliminating that slip lane and creating a larger or a tighter curb radius there. If we go to the next slide, we can talk about all the elements. So making sure that this is accessible for people with any disabilities, that we have signals with pedestrian countdown timers, potentially a larger refuge island. Looking right now at traffic counts and determining the feasibility of repurposing some turn lanes to, again, increase the space of that refuge island. It's quite a long distance to get across New Bern here. And then, of course, the crosswalks themselves and some pedestrian scale lighting. So some pretty significant rethinking of this and the Corporation Parkway and New Hope Road intersections being a pretty major priority. So I think that is the last slide that I had. It's a lot of, I know, content that I went through pretty quickly. Happy to go back, happy to take questions. I know you also have committee meetings that dive into topics like this in a little bit more detail. If it's desirable to have some conversation there, I'm certainly more than happy to do that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. Now open it up to the commission for comments. I cleared up some of what I wanted to ask about. You're looking for from us, and I would be happy to.
Commissioner Otwell, we're having trouble, I think, hearing you. We can hear you a bit, but it's pretty soft. It's not. Oh,
About that.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you. I checked all my buttons and nothing was red, but I had it wrong anyway. Thank you. I was going to ask what kind of action you were looking for from us. And if you had the time and wanted to send this to one of the committees that might be interested to take a more detailed look, because we do have folks that love to look at drawings and specs, which is probably a little much to dig into right now.
Right. So I would be happy. I recognize you have some other items on your agenda, and that's a lot of content to dive through potentially. So I would be happy to come back and maybe have some more space within a committee setting. Also, we'll share these slides, obviously, with y'all after. If you have, sometimes it's easier to, on your own time, to go through that. If you have some comments or questions, then I'd be happy to come back next month. In terms of what we're looking for, really just wanted to provide you with this information. No specific action is really necessary, but want to make sure that if there's some questions, if there's some feedback, that you have an opportunity to provide that.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll open it up and I'll ask the commissioners to keep their comments short. And Commissioner Tong, do you think this would be appropriate to bring to the planning committee? And do you think you have room on your agendas?
Yeah, we could definitely look at this.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and send this to the planning committee and take a deep dive into the documents. And I will open it up to the commission and Commissioner Barsness. I believe you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. This is great. I like it. Just one thought, and this is a comment for Tom, you guys to take up in planning committee. But that one last picture, I think it was the intersection of Trawick and Newbern. I noticed there were just some what appeared to me to be random cutouts going on to Newbern outside of what would be more logical streets. And so my question is, and I think about it from the pedestrian safety standpoint. Oberlin has a bunch of them right around Cameron Village that seem unnecessary. They're not the actual streets, and it's to me kind of dangerous sometimes when you're walking across a curb cut to go into a parking lot or to go into something when it's not maybe necessary. So I guess I would ask the planning committee to look to see if there's ways to reduce curb cuts where possible on Newbern along that entire stretch. Because again, I mean, you don't need 3 entrances into the Food Line or the Harris Teeter. I'm obviously making that up as an example, but you see my point. Just to try and improve the pedestrian safety along that entire corridor. Thanks.
I think it's a good comment. Obviously, that contributes to a lack of comfort when a pedestrian has to constantly look every 100 feet or so at whether there's a pretty fast-moving vehicle about to turn in. The drivers may not be paying very good attention. It just contributes to the sense of unease. When a new development comes in, so a lot of that is built to different standards than we would have today in terms of driveway spacing. Generally, the principle is to try and limit the number of access points and to have more spacing between driveways. What's there right now is suboptimal, to say the least. As developments come in, then there's the opportunity to, over time, create better spacing and reduce the number of access points.
All right, I believe I saw Commissioner Alley with her hand up. Has your question been resolved?
Just a question about kind of the deliverable after this plan is adopted, and I think it's generally great what I've seen of whether or not we might see Newbern listed as a complete streets project and put in the hopper for kind of more intensive infrastructure investments. I know that the BRT project is a little constrained financially, and they're going to be putting in that side path, which I think is great. And I understand why most of the money needs to go to transit itself. But I was thinking that that might be like an action step is to take it from kind of short-term to medium and even long-term actions, like what some of Kari's talking about, where a streetscape project might close driveways or put in ramp type, or think more about landscaping and lighting and that kind of next level streetscape infrastructure. And my second comment, and it's more of a question, I don't have the map pulled up in front of me, but I've been thinking about the recent text change that this commission supported about putting bikes behind the curb. And I can't remember if it would apply on Newbern or not. I think it does. I think it's a 6-lane avenue divided. And so I don't have the answer to this. Wondering what would happen if new development came in and they were required to build separate bike and ped space behind the curb, and how that'll jive with the shared use side paths. So just something to consider. But from what I've seen, great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Alley. I believe Commissioner Caruso, I saw your hand next.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a kind of a similar question to Commissioner Alley. Just wanted to kind of understand the kind of the scoping and kind of output desires of kind of this effort. I mean, I assume some of this is obviously specific to New Bern, but I assume a lot of this is going to be more of a framework that would get applied to all of the projects as they kind of progress through their phases. And I was just kind of wondering kind of what the overall timeline is for having kind of the final output. It seemed like sometime either late this year or early next year. And what is the proposed, or what kind of funding mechanism are we thinking about in this? Is this going to be I assume this will be independent of the actual FTA funding itself. This will be kind of independent complete street projects, and how are we thinking about actually funding these projects?
Yeah, so good questions. I want to be specific about what changes are likely to happen. So the transit project itself is almost complete in terms of its design. And when I say transit project, including the side path, the intersection improvements on New Bern, inside the Beltline, sidewalk upgrades, there's a lot there. And so that, at least for the portion of New Bern inside the Beltline, that's likely to be the final state of it for quite some time. Outside the Beltline, and I'm answering your question and Commissioner Alley's question a little bit at the same time. I think that there is likely to be some consideration in the future of, and this is longer term, of potentially extending bus rapid transit further towards Knightdale, of depending on ridership, potentially adding some more infrastructure, transit infrastructure along New Bern outside the Beltline. Those would be more medium-term planning projects. So what we would be seeing in the short term is more what we're looking at here is some specific projects to improve intersections, to address some sidewalk gaps where we know there's some places where there just physically is some missing infrastructure. In terms of funding, and to get to your question specifically, there is some several $1 million remaining from the previous transportation bond for exactly this type of work. And the general consensus is that this is the ideal place to use that funding, so that when we have operations beginning for BRT in 2024, we're also addressing some of those issues that locations that this process has identified as really critical areas in need of improvement. Those three outside the Beltline intersections being the most prominent of those, I would say. So there is funding for that's existing, and in fact needs a project to go ahead and speak for that funding and move forward. So longer term, outside the Beltline, if there's to be a significant rethink, a real complete streets approach, that would involve a pretty significant additional future planning process. But shorter term, addressing these really critical short-term issues, we think we've identified some high priority ones and have some funding to be able to address them.
Commissioner Stern.
Hey there. Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I was just thinking about kind of the logistics of folks who are sort of biking to BRT, hopping on the BRT, going downtown, and just thinking about if there's going to be bike storage kind of at these stations. And I know you had said something about requiring new residential developments to have some bike storage, but just just a bike stand doesn't always do it. Something covered, protected from weather is always nice. And, knowing that usually the buses only have capacity to hold 2 bikes. So just like having sufficient storage for folks to actually make the connection work for them.
Yeah, those are 2 critical things, making sure that people have adequate parking for bicycles. So at each station, there will be bicycle parking. That would be short-term parking under the assumption that people either potentially taking their bicycles on the vehicles or just leaving them at the station and then making a return trip later. But long-term parking and actually address that in terms of that transit overlay district. But that actually may be moot. There is a broader change to the city's code that would require long-term, which is what you described. So it's protected, it's covered, it's where you would keep your bicycle overnight or for an extended length of time. So long-term bicycle parking in any residential development, other than a detached house where, for the most part, people would have space in a garage or backyard. But anything where that's not the case, it would now be required going forward. That will go to City Council actually next month for a public hearing.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Barsness.
Thanks. Jason, when you were speaking about how to get to these BRT stations, it just occurred to me, I know that we had conversations about the possibility of having Citrix stations near or at the BRT stations. Barbara, do you remember that conversation? I just want to make sure that was still in the mix, or if it's not, because there's a good reason, it's maybe not a good idea. But I know that we had discussed that at one point in time, so I just wanted to bring that point up.
Yeah, so we actually have 3 bike share stations that are proposed along the BRT.
Okay.
One of those is at Edenton and Swain, heading inbound. The second is at New Bern and Tarboro, heading outbound. And then the third is out by Chanted Drive across from Wake Med. So those are the 3 that are a part of the actual BRT scope.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
That's actually another element of the map that had a lot of information on it. Had some potential future locations further to the east of those as well. So those may be, those wouldn't roll out necessarily as part of the transit project, but are identified as locations where future stations would potentially be located.
Commissioner Gellenbeck.
Thank you, Commissioner Otwell. Barbara, on regards to the Citrix cycle stations that are going to be affiliated with some of those BRT stations, does that mean the Citrix cycle is expanding into the residential areas that run along New Bern Avenue? So when how you get to the station on a bike, where did you acquire the bike from? Is that, I know this is probably outside of what Jason's talking about, but I just wanted to put that on the record.
Yeah, so it's actually sort of a part of what Jason's talking about as well. This past Friday, staff had a pretty large work session on this type of conversation, just talking about where those important connections are for things like bike share and other multimodal accessibility points. So we're kind of in the brainstorming phase of that about where exactly those locations are, but we are taking that into consideration as well.
And with that said, Jason, are you guys also putting e-scooters on your radar at the stations for having like a structure for people to park those scooters so that they stand upright? Because that will also be, I'm sure, used to gain access to the system.
Barbara, is that something, I think that, I think if there's some questions about the BRT station design, we could have transit come. I imagine that they have thought about that. Obviously, it's a pretty common way that people will probably access some of the stations, but I can't speak specifically to what kind of parking arrangements they might have been planning for.
Okay.
I have had conversations with folks in transit about other locations, not specific to BRT, but just more of a general conversation about incorporating kind of a dedicated space for those micromobility options around stations. But again, we could, of course, have transit explain that a little bit more in detail at another time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
These are great questions. Thank you, everybody. Is there Anything else anyone would like to add? Great. Well, I look forward to continue this conversation. Mr. Harden, I'd like to confirm our February Planning Committee meeting has been canceled. And so I wanted to make sure that you're available to meet in the third week of March and that wouldn't put you too far behind your timeline. Excellent. Then we will move this to the Planning Committee and commissioners will remind y'all when it gets closer, but anybody that wants to attend and take a deeper dive into those plans, of course, will be invited. Thank you, Mr. Harden. We look forward to seeing the next. I think this is really important. I really look forward to seeing this work get implemented. So I'm very excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Next up on the agenda, we will take a look at the annual streets resurfacing proposals for new bike lanes and traffic calming. And I will turn it over to Ms. Godwin. That appropriate? Should I turn it over to Brandy instead? I'll turn it over to staff. How about that? You guys go.
Yes, so I'm pulling this up for Brandy and myself and Paul to kind of run through this with y'all. So just give me 1 second.
While she gets teed up, I'll frame the conversation really quickly for those that are new. Every year, the city analyzes its streets, and based on a number of factors like age and condition and use, we'll prioritize a list of resurfacing projects for the year. And the transportation staff will compare that list and look at the bike plan. And if the bike plan calls for a bike facility on any of those streets that are due for resurfacing, they will do their best to fit the best facility they can into that space. And so this is the result of that effort.
Thank you, Chair Otwell. So just to piggyback on that, this year, the city of Raleigh will add over 2 miles of new bike lanes as part of 4 different road diet projects that are included in the 2022 annual resurfacing. So road diets, for some that may be listening, are ways to reconfigure the roadway to reduce the number of travel lanes, can also help improve safety and calm traffic, as well as provide better mobility for all road users. So the first section that we're looking at is over on Harvest Oaks Drive. This is between Strickland Road and Lead Mine Road. So at this time, Harvest Oaks has 4 lanes of vehicular travel with no bike infrastructure. So this is designated in the street plan as an Avenue 2-lane road. So this road diet will reconfigure this 4 lanes to 2 12-foot travel lanes, separated by a 10-foot median. Both sides of that travel lane have 3 feet of buffer. You can see here on the cross section, we've got 5 feet of bike lanes on either side of the road, with 2 feet of curb and gutter. So as you'll notice in this picture, we do have flexible delineators pictured here. There is enough room to install these. However, they will not be a part of the actual resurfacing project itself. They were not included in the initial cost estimates for this project. So we'll come back at a later time and include those. So I'm just going to keep moving through these, and at the end, we'll take any questions. And Brandy, of course, feel free to speak up here if I've missed anything. So just jumping over to Pleasant Valley Road, this will be between Glenwood Avenue and Millbrook Road. So at this time, Pleasant Valley has 4 lanes of vehicular traffic with a center turn lane and no bike infrastructure. It's designated as an Avenue 2-lane road in the street plan. This road diet will reconfigure the street to include 2 10-foot travel lanes separated by a 12-foot center turn lane. We'll also have 5-foot bike lanes on either side of the road. Both of those will be buffered with a 3-foot buffer. Also room here to include the vertical delineators. However, again, they will not be added with resurfacing specifically. Okay, just jumping over to Little Briar Creek Lane. This section is from TW Alexander Drive to Briar Creek Parkway. At this time, Little Briar Creek Lane has 2 travel lanes that are separated by a center turn lane. It's designated as an Avenue 2-lane road in the street plan. So this resurfacing will create 10-foot travel lanes with a 5-foot bike lane on either side, again with a 3-foot buffer and room to add delineators at a later time. And then Brandy, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk a little bit about Whitaker Mill. We've got a couple different options that staff was able to create for this specific road diet. And so I'm going to start off with the parking protected option. So this is between Reeves Drive and Wake Forest Road. This option adds 2 10-foot travel lanes and a 5-foot bike lane on one side, and then a 4-foot parking protected bike lane on the other side. So Brandy, again, anything that you want to add here specifically from the traffic engineering side about this cross section?
Sure. Just to give a little background on the existing footprint, it's currently mostly 4 lanes along this section. So we're taking it down in this version to 2 travel lanes with a dedicated parking lane where the parking will fit. Currently, the existing parking situation out there, you're allowed to park in the outside travel lane with the exception of peak hours. So there was, some sort of parking currently offered in the existing footprint. And so this scenario would create a permanent parking option on one side.
So I'll jump over to the next concept.
So this section would eliminate any parking. It would allow for bike lanes. You could either do a 5-foot bike lane, or if flexible delineators are desired, we could take away 1 foot and make them 4-foot bike lanes to allow some room for that flexible delineator to create a vertical separation there. This would allow for 2 10-foot travel lanes and a 10-foot center turn lane. I think this option, this option would go like the entire way, except for right when you get to Lake Forest Road, it would change.
All right, so we'll be happy to take any questions, and I can leave these cross sections up and come back to them as questions about each one might come up. So,
Barbara, I wanted to just share one more thing really quickly. We did have some conversations with street maintenance about the flexible delineators and access for trash pickup. And so Whitaker Mill Road is heavily residential. And so one concern there might be the buffered bike lane option with the actual delineator might be challenging for street maintenance to access trash pickup. They usually have an arm reach of 5 to 7 foot. So if we do use vertical delineators, they wouldn't be able to reach the trash cans. So that might prevent us from being able to consistently have vertical delineators for that specific design. I think the other 3 road diets are primarily not residential, so I don't think that would be as big of a concern for those, but for Whitaker Mill, that might be one issue we run into.
Right. Thank you very much for that presentation. Allow me to please give a quick report on behalf of the Planning Committee. These plans have been brought to the Planning Committee almost a month ago, and staff responded to our initial round of comments, and some of those comments have been integrated into the current designs as far as the configuration of the turning lanes and some of the finer details. We had the most discussion, as you might imagine, around the Whitaker Mill design. It's a little bit more challenging and a little bit more important. Okay, my mic's in the right spot. And again, after the planning committee meeting, Commissioner Gellenbeck and I have met a couple times with staff that they've further refined these options. And so I will just say that we are pretty much in agreement that we're all behind the Little Briar Creek and Pleasant Valley and Harvest Oaks. And definitely would love to hear your thoughts on them if you have any. But we wanted to get the bulk of the conversation around Whitaker Mill and get the commission's thoughts for what kind of cross section they prefer. And Commissioner Gellenbeck, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I thought it was good. I do have a comment about, oh, this is beyond what you said, what you described, but for the drawings. And I guess if we could go to the first one, which was Harvey Oaks. Is that the one? So, I like, Commissioner Otwell, I thought you were going to share how we were cycling on the protected bike lane in downtown Raleigh, and the 5-foot width is just not conducive to that side-by-side social component of bicycle riding. And even though we've got that 2-foot that's on the edge, that is typically littered with trash, and it's not a smooth surface. And so there really isn't 7 feet for a cyclist to cycle along. So I really would like to bring home again the message that we need to expand that cycle lane. And if it means taking away maybe a foot from the buffer, make the buffer 2 feet so that you have 6 feet of cycle, that would, give that comfortable spacing for 2 people to ride side by side. My handlebars are, 2 feet wide. My friend's handlebar is going to be 2 feet wide. That means there's only going to be a foot between us, which is really awkward. It's destabilizing. So I wanted to bring that up when I'm looking at these drawings. I don't know, maybe you got that 3-foot buffer that's close to the 10-foot median. Can you reduce that to 12 inches and give the space to the bike riders?
That's a valid point. I would like to give staff a chance to respond before I open it up to the rest of the commission. I guess I'll frame that as saying, is it possible to, at this point, to make any changes, or is this a up or down vote? And is it possible to reduce those lane widths and give the bike lane a little bit more room? I think that Commissioner Gellenbeck has a valid point.
I think there is room to make those changes. I think the current design is just based off our standard 5-foot bike lane, and that's what originated with that measurement there.
Yes, that's right, Brandy. I mean, I see 5 foot over and over again. And that's why I repeat over and over again that it's not inducing bicycle riding. So I really want to bring that message in to the committee and into the staff's operations, that we really need to kind of expand that to 6 feet. If at the minimum.
If I may ask, where is that standard located, the 5-foot bicycle lane? Because we no longer install in lane bicycles like for the new streets of this type. So is that where would that standard live?
It's on our city's website. I can send a link.
Thank you. Commissioner Gellenbeck, perhaps we might ask if the policy committee could take a look at that standard.
That'd be great.
And maybe make it a little bit more flexible, gobble up a little bit more road space as the standard when it's available.
I would like to visit the Whitaker Mill, but I'm going to step back and let other commissioners jump in and see if they kind of share ideas that I'm thinking about for it.
Thank you. I saw Commissioner Thomas with his hand up.
Yeah, I had related questions about the lane widths, and it looks like the drive lanes, the automobile lanes are on the other two, Little Briar Creek and Pleasant Valley Road, are only 10 foot wide, but the Harvest Oaks lane is 12 feet wide, plus the additional 3-foot buffer by the median. So that had a similar question. Can we reduce those widths and increase the bicycle lane a little bit? I also want to just make sure all of these locations are part of the 2016 bike plan. I haven't gone through that recently to review that, but I just want to make sure that there's sort of we're following a method here. We're not just kind of, taking a random opportunity because we have a resurfacing in this area. We're going to just throw bike lanes down.
I'll allow staff to respond to that. I think you'll do a better job than I will.
So I think the current process we have is we meet with the bike and ped coordinator, and they use the long-term bike plan as guidance on recommendations for which roads we'd like to add bicycle infrastructure where there isn't any. And so that's where we determine these locations to add bicycle facilities. Can you remind me what the other question was?
That was really my main question. The other thing, I was just kind of the same issue that Commissioner Gallenbeck was bringing up, the lane widths. I think on the Harvest Oaks travel lane was 12 feet wide, and the other two examples were 10 foot wide each. So.
Hey, Commissioner Gallenbeck. Hey, Paul Cal here. So let us take that for action, because I think that's a good point. We've got some extra pavement out there. So let us take that. The one thing I probably would say, so are we thinking 6 feet then of pavement? Is that, because I would worry going much more than that, because then it starts to feel like a lane that somebody may want to take from a car standpoint. So if we're thinking 6, then we'll take that. Brandy, you see any issues on that?
I think it depends on the location. If there's width we can take from somewhere else, of course, there's an option to consider that. It just depends on the specific locations and the road widths we have.
And I'm specifically saying on the Harvest Oaks, I think we probably got some opportunities to look at that one there.
Yeah, we do have some excess pavement there.
No, it's good feedback.
Thank you.
6 feet, by the way, Mr. Collin, would be perfect. I would be really happy with that. Mm-hmm.
I have Commissioner Alley and Commissioner Caruso on deck.
Thank you. Echoing the Harvest Oaks, I think it's great that if we can get more space for bikes everywhere. But I also am happy to hear other commissioners bringing up the lane width, because I would say even if we didn't widen the bike lane, a 12-foot vehicular lane really induces pretty high-speed traffic. And so unless there's some kind of extenuating circumstance, a heavily industrial area with a lot of truck traffic, for example, I'd love to see this commission pushing for 10-foot lane width max, regardless of what we get for bike and ped infrastructure. So I'm glad to hear staff can do it, and just wanted to throw a hearty third in. Thanks.
And Commissioner Caruso.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, most of my comments were kind of covered in the other ones as far as Harvest Oaks. I agree that I would like to see the lane width drop down. I mean, obviously it's nice. Obviously, it would be good to get the additional bike width capacity, but to Commissioner Alley's point, I think it would also be beneficial to kind of an overall traffic calming aspect. In addition to that, just kind of for clarification, the design that we're looking at here is only going to be this section from Lead Mine down to kind of the turn into the shopping center. Is that correct? And then kind of south of that down to Strickland, from what I remember from planning committee, will be 2 lanes, will be a single vehicular lane and then a right turn lane into the shopping center, where currently there's 2 through lanes and 1 turning lane. Is that still the plan?
Is that directed to staff?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes. So you're correct. The section showing here is the northern side. There on the south side, if you're starting at Strickland headed northbound, there was an existing right turn lane that drops off into the shopping center for the northbound approach. So the layout for that would be, for the northbound side, it would be a travel lane, a right turn only lane drop, a 5-foot buffer, and then the bike lane would be on the curb. We've also included some yield lines at that right turn lane, which are shark's teeth, the little triangles, to help better emphasize that yield movement there to the bikes.
Okay. And I guess, I mean, without seeing the specific drawing, I would just make the same comment as far as lane width. I mean, if we're going to have the same situation there, kind of keeping the 12-foot or 11-foot vehicular lane through the project area. I guess moving in the south direction, how does that look? Because currently there's just 2 vehicle lanes, and then it comes up to the intersection with 1 dedicated left turn and then a right turn and a through movement. So is that going to go down to 1 lane, or does the bike lane just drop off, or what does the intersection treatment look like?
So southbound approaching Strickland Road, it would just be a single travel lane where they could turn left, go straight, or turn right, all from the same lane. And the bike lane would end at Strickland Road as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, is there anybody else waiting to make a comment? So it is my understanding that we need to approve or disapprove. This is our chance. The schedule is tight and these contracts need to go out. Is that still the case, Mr. Callum? That's correct. So we are going to operate under the assumption that Harvest Oaks will come down, the automobile lane width will come down, and the bicycle lane width will come up to 6. But we still have not given a recommendation for Whitaker Mill, I don't believe. And so we need to, does the commission have an opinion on whether we like the parking protected lane? One of the concerns with the parking protected lane is that nobody parks there now. So what you'll have is a parking protected lane that kind of sits in the middle of the street. And if somebody parks in it, their car kind of be out in the middle of the street, potentially by itself. Commissioner Caruso.
Well, thank you. I would just have a question, I guess, for you, Mr. Otwell. If you and Commissioner Gallenbeck have been kind of looking at this, what are your thoughts and recommendations? And then I guess I have a follow-up question for staff as well, as far as the garbage pickup. I mean, considering that we allow parking there now, I guess, I mean, how does solid waste deal with that? Do they just kind of get lucky and no one normally parks there? Or, like, you know, if parking is allowed, how are they picking up the trash currently?
So we did do some study on what the existing parking situation out there was. And in our experience, there wasn't a lot of heavy parking out there at all. In the few instances that we saw parking, I think that was primarily like delivery trucks or, you know, landscaping vehicles, stuff that's there very temporarily. So I'm not sure that they necessarily ran into that issue.
And to answer your question, Commissioner Caruso, I see the benefits of both, and I would be happy to see this road get a road diet, no matter which implementation goes in. Personally, I would choose the buffered bike lanes without the parking protected element if I was forced to make a choice, but it's really close, and I really wanted to get everybody's opinion. And honestly, I would defer to staff what they think would work best in this situation, because I don't have experience with either. Commissioner Alley.
I don't know if the resurfacing program has a public input process, but curious if y'all have heard from neighbors about this.
Yeah, I'll let B person touch on that, Commissioner Alley. We got a couple statements back. B, you want to touch on that?
Yes, so we sent out a letter suggesting that the parking protected was going to be the option. And before we had, that was probably me being a little over efficient, but it was good because we got a couple of feedbacks. We got a church asking to allow them to park during funerals, which sounds like it's a couple of times a year that they would park in the bike lane for a couple of hours. which has been allowed in other places in the city, as well as 2 other emails of people supporting it. Both of them commenting that I spelled it incorrectly, so I apologize. It does not have 2 T's, it only has 1. And one of them was sort of saying some things you would like, make sure you slow the traffic down. Could we have some refuge islands for pedestrians? Some comments like that, as well as that they felt like there needed to be a turn lane. You know, they had seen the one with the parking protected without the turn lane. And so they were like, you sort of need a turn lane at, it wasn't at Reeves, something with the B. I can't remember which word, but they felt like there was a development back there that sort of asked for a turn lane. So she specifically thought that was a good idea. But otherwise, those 3 people were all pretty supportive and were recognizing the speeding and the wanted it to be more of a bike ped friendly neighborhood instead of a speedway.
And Commissioner Alley, I would just add, you know, as far as staff's feedback, we're just thinking about long-term kind of flexibility. And so I would say, if you're asking me, the center turn lane probably gives you flexibility from a pedestrian standpoint. That's kind of where our head was going. I know Commissioner Gellenbeck has walked that corridor a lot. And we just thought the center turn lane, when given the opportunity to look at some funding or strategically where it may make sense to look at some crossings, the center turn lane, you know, as long as it didn't conflict with any driveways, we may have the opportunity to put some raised islands out there. So I guess that's the beauty of the center turn lane. It just gives you flexibility down the road.
Yeah, I'd like to just add.
Please go ahead.
This is an area where I live, and so I do traverse it a lot. And I agree with having the turn lane. I can also attest that the parking on that street really doesn't exist at all times during weekends, evenings. So what I prefer is to give that space to the active transportation users instead of being for the cars. And what happens on Whitaker Mill is that as it gets closer to Wake Forest Road, the pedestrian sidewalk ends before it actually reaches Wake Forest Road. And I was identifying that that's a commerce area. First of all, there's a couple restaurants there, but on the other side of Wake Forest Road is a lot of development that's going in. There's one particular called, I think, the Iron Rust. It's going to be a really big deal. And we do want to have that alternate mode of transportation, so it's not just vehicle centric. And so I think it's really important that we take that space and dedicate it to active transportation users. And we reduce the speed on that road to 25 miles per hour. It's a residential area, and the road eventually narrows. And so what the DOT is going to do is they're going to have the vehicle traffic merge with the bicycle traffic as they head towards Glenwood Avenue. And if this speed is reduced to 25 miles per hour starting at Wake Forest Road, there'll be a really nice space for transitioning down, because we know not everybody drives according to the speed limit. But so that area is primarily 25 miles per hour. And so that would really increase the comfort level of cycling. I was surprised to see that the bike lane was reduced to 4 feet. If that's all we can squeeze out of that space, then, you know, what can we do? But I was surprised by that too. And with that, I'll open it up.
Commissioner Thomas.
I can't hear you. Yep, looks like his audio might have cut out.
Can we pull up the drawings for Whitaker Mill Road?
Yeah, I I was just going to ask Barbara, can we pull up those? I can't remember what the specific dimensions were for the ones we're talking about.
Yep, just give me one sec.
So while you pull that up, I have a comment from Mary Sell, who does not have access to the chat function. And she says, is it necessary to keep the center turn lane for the dual bike lane option? If the center turn lane was reduced or eliminated, would that give us room for buffered bike lanes down the corridor?
Whitaker Mill eventually reduces down to 2 lanes at Reeves Drive. When it gets down to 2 lanes, it's from Reeves Drive to Glenwood Avenue, 2-lane road.
So Chairman Otwell, we've got that concept, you know, we looked at it. So we can pull that up also.
Is there compelling reasons to keep us from choosing that concept?
Well, again, I think it limits your ability on the pedestrian aspect. I mean, that's just what I would say from a crossing standpoint. So it's just something you just have to keep in mind on that.
It definitely doesn't seem as friendly of a cross section to go across on foot.
Yeah, that's where we were trying to find the balance, frankly, with the center turn. You know, it's no perfect solution out here, and that's just where we thought the center turn could give you that balance, you know, in the future.
Well, I will share that people cross that road now. And at least with this, you have a 4-foot wide buffer. You have the bike lane. You have the 4-foot wide buffer, and so you're crossing just 2 travel lanes, vehicle lanes, before you get to a new buffer space. I don't know how the residents will feel. I don't know what the objections would be from them, but I don't know the volume.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Gellenbach, were you not finished? I apologize.
That's good.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of to that point or idea of not having the center turn lane through the entire corridor. I mean, currently there's only a turn lane that kind of pops up a few places. I mean, I don't know if you know, like an actual traffic engineer will sign off on it, but would it be possible to kind of have the center turn lane only in certain sections where we kind of envision a future mid-block crossing? I'm kind of thinking that it also would kind of indirectly could potentially help with some traffic calming if you're kind of, you know, you're kind of chicaning the road a little bit if the travel lanes weave a little bit from having a bigger bike lane buffer, and then in the sections where we have the mid-block crossing, we basically drop the buffer and go down to the cross section that we show with the center turn lane. So we get the buffered lane in a good portion of the corridor, but then we also get the center turn lane in some sections where it's useful in the future. It's like a kind of hybrid model, maybe.
Yeah, Commissioner Cruz, we'd have to look at it. Brandon, I just don't know the dimensions because I know some of the cross sections change out there. Keep me honest, at least on Whitaker Mill. So I just can't give an answer on that because I just don't know if we've got consistency out there with the pavement. Brandy, do you think that's anything we could do a couple spot checks on to see, like, I guess we don't have any turning count movements out there, I'm sure, on Whitaker Mill, at least we, to look at. So we'd be taking a guess on where they would be.
Yeah, I think in other locations where we were planning on eliminating a potential turn lane, we did get some counts and study it. I don't know that that was done in this case for these locations.
Yeah.
I think it would also depend on where we wanted to allow the turn lanes. I know there's some side streets, there's some shopping center driveways. So I think it just depends on how close those are and what that change would look like.
Okay.
I appreciate that. I have Commissioner Alley and then Commissioner Barsness.
Thank you. Similar to the previous comment, I wanted to see if there's any possibility for us to further reduce lane widths. I know we're at 11 and 10. I don't know if we are permitted to go any narrower than that. And then I also wanted to echo, I think, or Commissioner Caruso's really good comment about perhaps using a blend of the two. Whitaker Mill, the condition changes so much, both the road itself and then the adjacent land use. I think, the block distances change. So where mid-block crossings might be appropriate in one portion, they might not be in another. So I think it warrants a look at perhaps the answer is a blend. Thank you.
Commissioner Barsness.
And as I look at this image that's currently up, I see a buffer that's 4 feet wide and the lane is 5 feet. This is another great example of how it would be preferable that it be 6 foot lanes and 3 foot buffer. Try to shift to that change. That we're doing 6 feet wide bike lanes.
Commissioner Barsness.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to remember, are there currently any, there's not currently a center lane. Are there actual turn lanes on Whitaker Mill on the wide part, not the narrow part, but the wide part where it widens currently? And the reason I'm asking that question is, why do we actually think we need a center turn lane? Every time I'm on that road, it feels like there's much more traffic on the part that's narrow from Glenwood to, I forget what street it is, than the really wide part. The wide part always seems like there's much less traffic on it, but maybe it's because it's so wide that the cars sort of get engulfed in the wide pavement.
So I'm looking at it right. I'm looking at it right now. So it looks like Bernard Street there. Looks like it's a small left turn capacity there is what I'm kind of glancing at right now. So I tell you, Chairman Otwell, I tell you what, let's do. Let's take that feedback, and Brandy, we'll talk internal to see if there's any opportunity there to look at stretching the bike lane and maybe looking at some hybrid. So let's take that. We'll take that offline, and let me see if we can get there maybe with that feedback. The only thing I would say, Chairman Otwell, I'm going to have to look at timing, because this contract is not in my possession. It's in another group here in the department. But if it's something that we can look at with not conflicting with the contract, then I'll push the envelope here.
Well, personally, I really like the idea of seeing if we can add those buffers to the bike lanes. Would it be adequate if we were to vote to approve the 3 that we talked about so far with the revision of the 6 foot bike lane, and approve the center lane option if other options prove to be unavailable or you run out of time?
Yeah, I'll leave that up to the commission here.
But would that give you the flexibility and approval you
Yeah.
need to?
Yeah, and like I say, if we can come up with something that seems doable, then I'll definitely run that back through you. So Brandy, you feel like we can probably chat on this one, and we can just do a couple of maybe spot checks to see if that's doable.
Sure.
And then I'll talk to our transportation field services staff that's managing the contract to see if I can push this a little bit.
Well, thank you very much for doing the work to take a look at this. I think it could be important on Whitaker Mill. Commissioner Barsness.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood. I'm sorry, my cats were attacking each other, so I had to step away. The question that I had is, Joe, I think I heard Mr. Caruso. I think I heard your comment. You talked about possibly a hybrid where some turn lanes. What was the other thing? Was it like a pedestrian refuge at certain intersections? I want to make sure I understood what your hybrid option was.
Yeah, so basically what I'm suggesting is that we would have, instead of having instead of having 3 lanes through the entire corridor with a continuous center turn lane, we would have kind of similar to what's on the road now, where the turn lane appears and drops. I mean, really, it looks like at Bernard Street, there's a left turn into Bernard, and that's really it. There's a right turn going west on Reeves, but most of the corridor is just 4 lanes with no center lane, except where it kind of widens out to Bernard. So what I'm proposing is, percentage-wise, most of the corridor would have the 2 lanes of vehicular traffic with the buffered bike lane. So we have, the full bike lane with the buffer. And then at kind of select portions where we have the turning lane, the buffer would effectively disappear. You would keep the bike lane, but the buffer would disappear, but then you would have a turn lane. And then depending on kind of how things are laid out, if it's basically a T intersection and there's only one turning movement, you can put a pedestrian refuge on the other side of the intersection so that you can build a mid-block crossing, which doesn't really currently exist in this area. So you kind of get sort of the best of both worlds within kind of a limited right of way. You obviously lose the buffer aspect where there's the turning lane, but kind of, at least in theory, if you have that mid-block crossing, it kind of adds its own little traffic calming in there, so it mitigates it at least partially.
So that's very helpful. Thank you. So my I would prefer pedestrian refuge over a crosswalk, over a center turning lane. I know they serve very different purposes, but that's because I walk a lot and I don't always feel safe where I walk, even around Cameron Village. And so I would, unless there's really a good reason for you guys and you have some data to support that you actually need a center turn lane, I would advocate for, where appropriate, making sure that whatever pedestrian crossing you have is a good one. I mean, even, quite frankly, even when you have two 11 feet wide car lanes, plus a buffer, plus two bike lanes, that actually to me even gets wide for a pedestrian to walk across the street, right? I mean, Whitaker Mill is wide, and so anywhere where you can actually put in that pedestrian refuge, I would be much more supportive of that than, frankly, turn lanes, unless the turn lanes are demonstrated based on the data that you guys have that they're actually necessary.
Well, just to quickly clarify, like the turn lane and the refuge, well, at least in this design, would mostly be the same thing. It's not an either or. So at the example at Bernard Street, since it's a T intersection, going westbound, there's no left turn movement because it's residential on the south side. So you only turn left in one direction. So on the other side, since there's no one's going west and turning left, on that side, on the right side of the intersection, you would have the refuge, and on the left side you would have the turn lane. So there you get both. It's not an either or.
And that is the attraction of having a consistent center turn lane, is that it reserves that space in the future. That if we ever decide we need to put a mid-block crossing anywhere, that space is available. Where if we create a different road section now, then in the future it reduces the options for installing those. How is the commission feeling about wanting to, everybody seems to, the speaking seems to be in favor of the Caruso option. If staff can pull it off, but if it's not a possible, or if time does not permit, then we would ask them to fall back onto the center turn lane option.
But I guess since it's going to be named after me, I will make a motion. I'll make a motion that we endorse the plans as provided, noting the comments on Harvest Oaks to modify the street section to 11-foot lanes and 6-foot bike lanes, and note that staff will continue to look at Whitaker Mill for a future hybrid option.
Mr. Callum, you think that's workable for you guys?
Yeah, Chairman, like I say, we'll push the envelope on the Whitaker Mill, and I can't speak to that right now because again, some of this is out of my control. So I will put it this way: I will do what I can, and again try to support the comments that we've gotten from the commission here. Now, Brandy, you and I can chat offline, and if we come up with something, Chairman, I may just push it back to you to say, hey, probably not going to be able to bring this back to the full commission just because of time. And so I may have to lean on you and maybe a couple other people offline just to say, hey, is this what we're thinking on that?
I'm comfortable with that. And if the commission is, then we can move forward. Commissioner Tong, I believe, do you have a comment?
Do we want to
second
first center turn lane option in case they can't make anything work for the hybrid?
I'll put that back to Commissioner Caruso.
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit. What is the question that you want to you want to have this center turn lane through the entire corridor?
Do we want to also like partially endorse the center turn lane just in case they can't do the hybrid?
As our preferred backup instead of the parking protected option.
That way they don't have to like bring it back to us and.
Right. Yeah. That one is the buffered bike lane, or is that what? I'm getting them confused. Can you, Barbara? Could you pull it up real quick? 1 second again, just so we're clear on what that actually entails.
The two options were the parking protected lane, where there'd be a parking lane on one side and then a bike lane outside of it, only a bike lane on the other side, no center turn lane, versus like a symmetrical street section with 2 travel lanes, a center turn lane, and 2 bike lanes of equal width. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, the center. Okay, so the center turn lane is only a 4-foot lane with a 1-foot buffer, which is not great. Versus, okay, and then the other one would be parking protected 4 and 5 with a buffer.
Can we drop the lane widths on the other one? Can we go back to the other one?
I thought they were 10, weren't they? Yeah.
Dang,
Can
okay.
we go to 9? I thought we,
No,
can't
I
really do
don't
that.
think they can go to 10. No, 9.
yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, the 4 is not, I know we're kind of constrained here on total right away. The 4 is kind of giving me a little heartburn here, to be honest.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree too.
I mean, kind of get from I guess an engineering standpoint. I mean, I guess we can kind of, if we can do the one, we can probably do the other. But in the parking protected scenario, can the buffer be reduced to 2 feet, so that we get 5 and 5?
I guess the 3 feet is there because of dooring concerns.
Yeah, but I mean,
So-
I'm kind of
I
assuming
suggest
it's
we
not
go
gonna
with
be
the
cars
center
there.
turn lane. I think it'll preserve more options for
Optionality.
future traffic calming and pedestrian access where, I don't think no matter what we do, this is not going to be a protected and comfortable bike lane. But we
Yeah.
can make it a safer pedestrian environment. And I think that that's going to be more valuable here than trying to push the bike lanes.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Commissioner Otwell.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is a hard one.
I'm not thrilled with that result. You just.
I don't think there's any results here I'd be thrilled with, but I think that these are all improvements.
Yeah.
That's the one I'd throw my weight behind if we couldn't get the Caruso option. And I'd be happy to put it to a vote, and it's okay for us to disagree.
Yeah, I think I agree
I see
with you.
Commissioner Alley with her hand up. I'd like to get her. I know that we've already made a motion and we should be voting, but we'll suspend the rules.
Just a quick comment about this center turn lane option. What I think I'm hearing from Mr. Callum is that this would reserve the kind of possibility in the future if we were to do like an actual streetscape project where you could create a planted median with ped refuges. And my hope is that at that time that could be less than 10 feet wide. Perhaps that could be 5 feet wide and give us the option of going to a full protected 6 foot wide bike lane. I might have been misunderstanding, but I think that's what he was saying. Not that we needed the turn lane, but that it reserves right away for a center median.
No, so Commissioner Allen, you're right. So, I mean, what that gives the flexibility for you to do is, y'all are struggling with the bike lane width. So in that scenario, you could change some of the dimensions out there with the 10-foot center turn. You could put a smaller median island in, and again, maybe expand your bike lane. So it just gives you flexibility, at least in my eyes, again, it's my personal opinion, more flexibility down the road to do those types of things. Maybe to help out the cycling community with larger lanes, and then also the pedestrian community with crossings. So just something to think about.
Well, if that was the,
Go ahead.
if that was the case, then why don't we just do two-way traffic and no turning lane at all, and just go ahead and give the proper space to induce bicycle riding?
That seems like the Caruso option to me.
No, well, Caruso option was kind of that, but Caruso option narrowed created the turning lane that forced vehicle drivers to encroach on bicycle riders and bicycle riders down to 4 foot lanes.
Well, I mean, I would like to see some pedestrian refuges in the future. I mean, the actual curb to curb width of the roadway, especially at like the Bernard Street intersection, is quite wide. So I would like to have more than just paint and flexi posts out there in kind of a longer term. But I agree with Chairman Otwell. I think the center turn option gives us more optionality longer term. The parking protected option is kind of fulfilling a need that's not really there, considering no one's really using it now. So I would, I guess, amending or making a new motion, I would move that BPAC will endorse these plans with the note of the Harvest Mill or Harvest Oaks, 11-foot vehicle lane and 6-foot bike lane, and on Whitaker Mill, staff is going to continue to look at it and improve if possible, but if not, we will endorse the center turn lane option if additional options are not available.
Commissioner Alley?
A friendly amendment to reduce the Harvest Oaks lanes to 10. I think he said 11.
Right. Well, that would move the bike lane to 6. I think there was some concern if we had the bike lane be 7 feet, then it might end up looking a little too wide.
You could widen the buffer.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll ask for a staff opinion on that. I mean, is there any reason why we couldn't widen the buffer out?
The only thing I would say, Commissioner Alley, just on the Harvest Oaks, just thinking we got a shopping center there with tractor trailers. That would just be something we need to look at turning templates, because I know that main driveway there into the shopping center. So that's something we could look at.
So
well, I don't know what that leaves us with as far as the amendment.
Let's strike everything. And Commissioner Caruso, would you like to start over again with a new motion?
Well, I don't know where that leaves us as far as staff's going to look at the 10-foot option. Yeah, I mean, I move that we endorse these cross-section, the repavement plan as presented, with the note of the Harvest Oaks lane width being modified to a 10-foot lane if possible. Otherwise, move to an 11-foot travel lane if not possible, and moving the bike lane to 6 feet. And on Whitaker Mill, ideally with the buffered bike lane hybrid option as discussed, and if that's not possible, defaulting back to the center turn lane option.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Opposed?
I just have to say that, you know, one of the things that the feedback that came was the church people want to park in the bike lane. They're not going to be able to do that when it's only 4 feet wide. I'm just trying in all the means I can to get that bike lane a little bit wider. And if it's to allow the church people to park in it, I'll buy it.
Wonderful comment to cap off that conversation. And so thank you very much, everybody, for the deep dive into this detailed design. Thank you, Brandy, so much for your work. I hope I didn't make you work too hard over the weekend coming up with this, and hope we haven't put too much on you in the near future, but I really appreciate you looking into this. And unless there's more on this topic, I would like to convene a break, please. I know that we still have one more topic left to go, but we've all been sitting here for almost 2 hours. So let's take let's come back at 7:45. Commissioner Barsness.
Yes, just I emailed you today, but I have another obligation, so I will not be back after break.
Wonderful, thank you. And I got your comments about the letter, so I'll make sure that gets addressed. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, I'll see everybody back here at 7:45. Thanks for joining us back again. We're here for the last issue on the presentations portion of the agenda tonight, and it is the Capitol Boulevard North BPAC letter. And so you have all hopefully received an email with a draft of this letter, and I've been having some conversations offline one-on-one, and here it is. For those that are not familiar and those that might be watching, the city is developing a plan, a corridor plan for Capitol Boulevard between 440 and 540. And we don't think it's a good plan for the city. Those of us that has crafted this letter, I've worked with Mary Sell, who's the director of Oaks and Spokes. And I've worked with Vice Chair Nick Neptune and Nate Spencer, who also both work for Wake Up Wake County. And this letter outlines our problems with the plans as they stand, and we avoid giving solutions because we'd like to continue that, and it's to be a much longer document if we were to start going into the things that we think could be done instead. But this is we hope it's straightforward, and I hope this is be a quick topic because we have had these conversations, and I think most everybody's had a chance to look at it. So I will go ahead and open the floor for comments, and those of you that haven't had a chance to read it can check your email or read what's on screen here. And let me see, I'm not seeing everybody at once now. I have to go to full screen. All right, so I will note there's been a couple edits before she signed off. Commissioner Barsness indicated that we need to make sure it's on behalf of the full BPAC, and I hope to have your vote to approve this letter tonight. I made that change, and I hope also that Mary Sell and Nate Spencer are online with this meeting. They were going to try to arrange to be here, and so to make sure that they can voice their final consent or have any questions or objections to any changes we might make. And if not, I believe that Vice Chair Neptune would be able to speak on behalf of Wake Up Wake County. So I'll go ahead and open the floor to any questions. Does anybody had a chance to read the letter? Have anything they'd like to add? Commissioner Alley.
I think it's pretty clear in the letter, but just perhaps as a talking point for follow-up for this letter, the city's corridor plan is looking at like the land use and bike and ped infrastructure, open space infrastructure around a planned NCDOT grade separation. So I don't know. I don't think the plan as drafted by the city sufficiently mitigates the adverse impacts of that widening. But I would say it's worth noting that the origin of this harm is from that NCDOT grade separation, which is the thing that we fundamentally, I think, oppose, as well as the insufficient strategies around the harm reduction from that grade separation. So I don't know if that needs, if that clarification is worth an edit. I just wanted to put that out there that I don't think that this plan goes far enough, but really the origin of my discontent is that grade separation.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that aren't familiar, this is an NCDOT inspired project. So NCDOT wants to grade separate this road, and Raleigh is responding by creating a plan to have on the books that they think is better than the standard NCDOT standard that we would get if we did not have a plan on the books. So I understand the motivation for creating this plan, and I'll echo exactly what Commissioner Alley said, the freewayification or the creating a bypass road, I think is bad for the city and fundamentally. And I do think that there are other things that need to be done if there is no other option to mitigate that harm. And I would be open to edits. I also think that we can make that clear as our intention, and the nuance can be delivered probably better in person through the commissioner speaking to the counselors who nominated you and in person, and through email and on the phone if you would. But I'd be open to an edit if you would like to propose one.
I don't think an edit is necessary, more the talking points around the delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Godwin, do you see Mary Sell and Nate Spencer online? Is there any way that you can promote them and bring them into the conversation? Mary might be Mary is watching RTN, so she can't join. Never mind.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Nate either in the attendee list here, so I don't think I can pull them in.
If y'all are out there in the cloud and you have any problem with what we're doing, then send me a text real quick. But besides that, Commissioner Caruso?
Yeah, I mean, I guess minor typo comment or something. It looks like, at least on the latest draft I have, the above the kind of 2 line, it says New Bern. So just to clean that up before this gets sent along. But yeah, I mean, I think I certainly agree with the underlying intent of the letter and all of that, and certainly support the letter.
Mary Sell also made a comment to me earlier that it's important to consider that the harm done by this project is echoed by the similar project north of 540, which is completely out of our purview. That will also make a freeway out to 98, out to Wake Forest eventually, as part of the NCDOT plans. And so we restricted this letter to the portion that the city was taking into its plan, but everything that goes for this goes double for what's going on outside 540, where we won't even have the protected intersections and stuff that we're hoping to get if the Capitol Boulevard plan north goes through. So if nobody has any comments and nobody seems to be objecting, is that your hand there, Commissioner Stern? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, more just a question for folks who are more familiar with the history of this project. Is this associated at all with like trying to build more BRT infrastructure?
It anticipates a BRT as an eventual option, but it is not in coordination with Go Raleigh, or there's no Capitol Boulevard is on one of the long-term options for the 3rd, I believe, BRT route, because they will do New Bern, and then they're looking at Western Boulevard, and then they're going to assess the northern route, I believe is the state of that.
I was just confused looking on the webpage for the project. It seemed like in some places it was BRT, in some places it wasn't. It was more clarification, no comments on the letter. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'd be happy to answer questions about context. I would, at least, and the history of this project. It's come before the BPAC a few times, and our biggest issue, our biggest complaint from BPAC's perspective at the time was that it removes the separated bike path from Capitol Boulevard and replaces it with a proposal for a network of off-corridor bicycle facilities. And I don't think that those are adequate replacements, and I think people will still use the Capitol Boulevard corridor specifically on their bicycles, and I think that needs to be anticipated, but that's in the letter. So could I ask somebody to go ahead and move to approve the letter, including the noted edits that I'm working here on my my drive version that Ms. Barsness and Mr. Caruso have requested? All right, I'll take Commissioner Caruso in a second. Commissioner Stern, and all in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. I will work up a final draft in conjunction with Mary Sell and Vice Chair Neptune, and we will distribute that to staff and the commission. Next on the agenda is the chair's report, and that what we just discussed with Capitol Boulevard North has been taking up most of my time. We have also been hosting discussions, not hosting, pardon me, I've been attending discussions hosted by Transportation, and you heard all about that with the Whitaker Mill bike lanes. We've been busy doing that. And we have a check-in with Councilor Melton, City Councilor Melton, coming up this Thursday. So if you have any questions or issues you'd like to put before his attention, please get in touch with me and we'll make sure it gets covered. We have a new commissioner, Commissioner Michael Thor has been selected by the City Council. And I was hoping to see him today, but I don't know if we got everything done in time to catch him. So we'll look forward to seeing him at a new meeting. And I believe that's all I have for the chair's report. And we will move on to the committee report if there's no questions about the chair's report. All right, I would like to start off with Commissioner Caruso. Could you give us a rundown of what you've been doing in the policy committee?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, this month the policy committee continued our discussion from last month about how different site plan tiers are providing different levels of bike and ped enhancements, and how some conditions could lead to quite sizable projects not being required to bring those facilities up to our current standards for the current standards for our design in the city. So this month we spoke with staff and with planning staff, and I believe we have a really good understanding of kind of the scope and nature of the issue. And we're currently working on a summary of our findings, along with a letter to be sent to our council liaison, Councilor Melton, via the chair, Mr. Otwell, as he mentioned, at their meeting for later this week. So we should be kind of finalizing our findings and kind of providing a report, so to speak, on that, and hopefully move that forward and look at closing some gaps in our current design review process that could lead to projects not providing the level of bike and ped facilities that we believe they should be. And that's pretty much it for this month.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that we will get that in front of Councilman Melton this week, but I think it would probably also be appropriate to bring back the full findings and give a presentation to the commission when the report is done, and maybe request an official look.
Sure.
Thank you. And next up, who is next up on my screen? Commissioner Tong. Could you give us a rundown of what the planning committee has been doing?
We do not have a planning committee meeting this month, but our next meeting will be on March 22nd at 6 p.m. and we will be discussing pavement striping, crosswalks at intersections. And it sounds like we also might have a new BRT topic as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but not least, Vice Chair Neptune, what's been going on with outreach?
Thank you, Chairman Otwell. We've had an active month with outreach and engagement. Myself and actually Commissioner Gellenbeck and Chairman Otwell, you are also in attendance at an advocacy meeting with our friends with Oaks and Spokes. We had about 20 plus folks meet up with us at Union Station to discuss, engagement with our city in a proactive, healthy, and constructive way to continue to see the investments made in our cycling and pedestrian infrastructure that we'd like to see. But in addition to that sort of outreach and engagement activity, we had our meeting this month, and much of it was involving the Whitaker Mill Road resurfacing with Ms. B. Person and Mr. Callum. And separate from that conversation, of course, we're all looking forward to our Greenway cleanup this Saturday. Would love to see all of you. We'll be meeting up at Anderson Point Park to engage in a Crabtree Creek Trail Greenway cleanup in coordination with our friends with Parks Maintenance. We'll be joined by a few folks from the Parks Recreation Greenway Advisory Board, and I think we may even have a few folks from City Council joining us. So again, that's this Saturday at 9 a.m. We'll be meeting at Anderson Point Park. I would love to see as many of your smiling faces out there this coming Saturday morning. You know what they say, many hands makes the work light. So there you go. That's the report from Outreach and Engagement. I'm Nick Neptune, and that's it.
I would like to add that I plan on riding my bike out the Greenway Trail to get there on Saturday morning. So if anybody would like to meet up with me somewhere around the western side of the Crabtree Creek Greenway and ride all the way out, holler at me offline and we'll work something out. We'll set up a meeting point. So thank you very much. I believe that does it for the committee reports. And are there any staff reports this evening?
Yes, I know we do have a few for the commission tonight, and so I'll start off. Really just one thing for me, transportation staff across transportation planning and transit are working on planning for Bike Month. So we're in the process of finalizing our calendar, and we'll share that with the commission once those dates have all been selected and we have more of a firm calendar for you. So just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Hey, Chairman Otwell, just a couple of things for the commission here. So the West Street discussion, as far as bike and ped infrastructure, those conversations are still going on with staff. I'm actually meeting with staff this week to kind of look at some conceptual drawings. So I'll probably be reaching out to you here in the near future to kind of share what we've kind of come up with, and also having some conversations with Parks and Recs and our friends over in Parks and Recs and Cultural Resources about what some concepts may look like on the interim, even through Devereaux Park. So some good conversations going on there. Just an update, I cannot share the name yet. The paperwork is still getting finalized here by HR, but we have hired a new bike and ped manager, which would be in Paul Black's old position. So excited for this individual to start. They'll be starting next Monday, February the 28th. So excited to see this individual join the team. And as I had mentioned to Chairman Otwell, y'all are probably maybe getting tired of seeing my face some. So you'll have a new face hopefully next month here. So that's all I've got, Chair.
Thank you very much. That brings us to board comments and announcements. We'll start with board comments. I will open the floor with Commissioner Alley.
Thank you, Chair Otwell. Just a quick note of appreciation to staff and the commissioners that were involved in that street resurfacing. It is so heartening to see some of these really oversized roads being calmed, and for the benefit, I would say, for all users, including motorists, and for the adjacent neighborhoods. I think y'all are being very creative about what is just resurfacing and paint. And making this the best that it can be. And I've really seen a lot of improvement in that program over the years. So thank you.
Thank you. I was very excited to see so many traffic calming projects integrated into the resurfacing program, regardless of bike infrastructure. So I will echo those comments. Anybody else have any comments for the public? Yes, Commissioner Gellenbeck.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that on Sunday, Oaks and Spokes is hosting a walk audit, kind of near Conn Elementary. So I'm super excited about that. And you can find more details at their website, oaksandspokes.com. And hopefully somebody might be free to join me.
If you'll allow me the liberty to share a little story, Commissioner Alley and I took a walk around that area not too long ago, and she pointed out a pretty perplexing curb cut that didn't mesh well with a crosswalk, and we brought that to the attention of Mr. Callum, and he is on top of it, and they're hoping to address that in one of several ways as soon as they can. So you'll see that out there. I'm sure it'll be hard to miss, but there's good stuff happening out there. So I had one comment slash question from Ms. Godwin as part of my comments. I'm very excited about phase 2 of the Citrix bike share. And was hoping that would it be appropriate to ask for an update sometime soon? Is there anything going on? What's up with the bike share?
Yes, I can definitely provide an update at an upcoming meeting. We are planning for future stations. We've got some internal meetings being held in March. So I'll have a little more information about the feasibility of some of those stations that we cited this past year. So happy to bring a report back for the March meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Otwell, may I expand on that topic of the Citrix cycle? And Barbara, this past week, we got a few feedback from users, and the for example, one was that the bike that they borrowed or they rented, the battery was already practically dead. Another person complained about the mechanics of it, and one of our very own told a fabulous story of how the pedal came right off. Right. And I don't know who we talked to. Everybody here wants this program to succeed. I love our Citrix Cycle bike share program. But if we have bicycles that are not performing when people rent them, then they're going to perpetuate the stories. They're going to talk about them more than they're talking about the good stuff about it. So who do you recommend that we send them to when somebody shares a story, and then we could, give them a direction of where to send feedback so that Citrix Cycle gets this information instead of people just talking amongst themselves?
Yeah, so anytime, a user experiences difficulties with their ride, I encourage them to report an issue through the app if they have that. There's also a help number that they can call in the event that their bike has lost functionality. There's also an email at info@citrixcycle.com. I can send all this information out to the commission, and they can continue to relay this to those that might be interested. But those 3 ways are how I would encourage people to report these issues. I, of course, can consult with our operator on some of these and just maybe ask for some increased checks on maintenance and functionality of the bikes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Gellenbeck, if I could just make a brief sort of follow-up comment to the story we were told about the low battery issue. As it happens, this weekend I was trying to pull a bike for use, a Citrix bike, and it would not allow me to pull the bike because of a low battery. So as it relates to, perhaps that was an issue in sort of months or years prior, but at least speaking to present day and kind of moving forward usage of the Citrix bikes, I mean, if the battery is low enough, it will not allow you to pull the bike, which I was, of course, grateful for because, I have my fair share of stories to share, as some folks on this call know, and yet I am going to be the first one to be a proponent for our Citrix bikes. So, anyways, all that to be said, hey, Barbara, I've got your back. I'm here for you. I'm here for the whole Citrix Cycle team. I'm all about micro mobility, multimodal, sustainable, healthy ways of getting around our city. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about America. So I'm here for it.
Yes, and so am I, and I want to empower the public to participate, so that they can back it up, so that Citrix Cycle can be the best it can be. To me, it's our city's darling, and if it succeeds, we will succeed in diversifying, the way that we move around the city. So it's all good.
I'll also add, there's a setting on the bell of the bike. So if you press the button that would normally set off the bell prior to checking it out, the screen will flash and show you how much battery is left in terms of time and miles. So that's another good way to check that.
Life hacks. Commissioner Caruso.
Thank you. I just had a question for follow-up from staff for next month. There's a at the intersection of New Hope Road and Lewisburg Road. It looks like quite a while ago, NCDOT kind of started a project to install slip lanes, and the concrete is in the ground, but there's only like the concrete fixtures to kind of create the lanes, and they never came back and moved the crosswalks and installed pedestrian signals. I know Mr. Lamb asked for an update from them, but they didn't really seem to have one a while ago. So I just wanted to see if staff could try to follow up with DOT again and see if there's some new information on that project. That's obviously is a high pedestrian traffic area and has one of our Go Raleigh routes turns around there. So I'd like to hopefully see that project getting finished sooner than later.
Make sure that gets into the notes. Thank you. And yeah, I do remember that intersection, having walked through it and having talked about it on BPAC before. So I look forward to seeing that get fixed. All right. If there are no more comments, we can get to the announcements. And I believe we already mentioned the upcoming walk audit on Sunday and the Greenway cleanup coming this Saturday. And we talked about Bike Month is coming up, so please be sure to check the city's calendar and get in touch with Oaks and Spokes if you want to volunteer your time and energy to doing Bike Month activities. Are there any other activities or events coming up y'all want to announce? All right, moving on, we will confirm our next BPAC meeting. Oh, wait a minute, we had to go back to board comments, and perhaps it should have been part of my report. I forgot, very important topic. The city council has directed all commissions and boards to return to in-person meetings as of April of this year. So it is not up to us. And we have also been informed that as of now, that also applies for all the committee meetings. So we are working with the liaison and pushing back. We would like to be able to have committee meetings, the less formal ones, virtually. I think it would really free people up to attend. But for now, that is the way that it is. We have the option of coming back in person for our March BPAC meeting. Our committee meetings will stay virtual next month. And so I want to talk to the commission about how y'all feel about March. Yeah, we can just thumbs up. We're okay. All right, well, I don't think we need an official vote on it, but for now we will work with staff to see if it's possible to bring us back to in-person meetings on March, and the committee meetings will stay virtual until everything goes back in person in April, barring any unforeseen circumstances, which heavens knows that can't happen. So look forward to seeing everybody in person next month. Thank you very much. And with that, I will go ahead and confirm the next BPAC meeting for Monday, March 21st, 2022 at 6 p.m. Any conflicts we need to discuss? And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your efforts. I look forward to seeing you soon.